Hey there, good morning. I'm meteorologist Peyton Malone with WWL Louisiana here in New Orleans, updating you on what we're tracking in the tropics with Rafael. This storm is in the Caribbean. It is trying to strengthen. You can see here just off the top here, we do have some hurricane warnings up for some countries. The Cayman Islands have hurricane warnings in effect, and the western side of Cuba has hurricane warnings in effect, with tropical storm warnings now officially including the Key West area there in Florida, so along with Jamaica. So those are the immediate areas that are getting ready for impacts from this system. A current look at where it is as of the 9 a.m. advisory. It is currently sitting just about 65 miles to the west of Jamaica. The storm is moving northwest, fairly good rate at 13 miles an hour. It'll be near the Cayman Islands tonight. The official track as of 9 a.m. taking it near the Cayman Islands as a hurricane later on this evening and tonight. It will approach the western side of Cuba as we go into tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. And then notice it's in the Gulf of Mexico by Wednesday evening, still likely as a hurricane. So the storm will probably at least level off in intensity or get knocked down slightly as it does pass over Cuba, but it will be at a steady enough rate that we probably won't see too much disruption with the storm itself. Now, once we fast forward this in the Gulf of Mexico, I do think the storm is still going to be fairly healthy through Friday. So Thursday and Friday, it's in the southern Gulf, may even intensify more. I mean, a category 2, not out of the question. And then this is when things get interesting. The storm continues to move to the northwest and begins to weaken. And you can see here by the end of the cone, it's somewhere in the north central Gulf of Mexico, most likely weakening and becoming really unorganized. Now, this is thanks to wind shear, dry air, and the cooler water temperatures here on the northern Gulf Coast. Now, I would not lock in on the center of this cone because once you get past day 4, so we're talking into Saturday and Sunday, where you're seeing the wider parts of the cone, right in here, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty on exactly where this thing is going to be, and more importantly, what is even going to be left of it. There are scenarios where there's really not much left over of it by this weekend. Now, if the storm comes into the Gulf here, and it is stronger, maybe in this area right in here, it gets up to a category 2, it may take a little bit longer for it to wind down, but the general trend will be for once we get into Friday and Saturday, and especially Sunday, there may not be a whole lot left of it. And then there's the question, does it dissipate and stay down here in the central Gulf, or does it continue to stay weak and get pulled up to the north to maybe Louisiana, or maybe even comes this direction towards parts of the Florida Panhandle? These are all scenarios that could play out at this time. But I will say right now, the confidence is fairly high up until around Friday. And then after that, all bets are off. One thing for sure, we do think it will weaken, but where exactly it goes and how quickly does it weaken remains the biggest question. So if you have plans in Louisiana this weekend, Bama and LSU, Saturday evening, I would not plan on canceling anything. Go about things as normal right now, but follow the forecast closely. I just want to show you how wide of scenarios we have right now, and this is mainly thanks to the storm dissipating. So the green is your European model, and green there on the southern side of the cone. Your red is the GFS or American model. And I'm showing you this because they're basically showing two separate outcomes of what could happen. The green keeps it slightly stronger down into the southern Gulf, in the central and southern Gulf. And the American model in red there brings the storm, or whatever is left over of it, up into the northern Gulf here as we go into Saturday and Sunday, and whereas the GFS turns it down to the south like this. So, I mean, that's about as far apart as you can get when you're looking at model solutions. So we've been talking about the uncertainty with this, and the uncertainty really arises when the storm begins to encounter that wind shear. And naturally, it's going to be slowing down, and wind shear is going to be weakening. A weaker and slower moving storm is always harder to forecast than, let's say, a stronger hurricane. I mean, a category 5 hurricane sometimes is easier to forecast than a weak tropical storm or a weak tropical depression. And you can see here, when you look at all of our different outlooks on where this thing could end up going, you've got this widespread from up around New Orleans to all the way down here in the southern Gulf. What's happening here is models are trying to determine what to do with it once it does get sheared off. So imagine what wind shear does to a storm. Whenever you have a center of circulation with a tropical storm or a hurricane, it's at the surface, and above it you've got showers and storms on top. But when wind shear starts to interact with that storm, it starts to blow those storms away from the center. And in this case, more than likely all these showers and storms, they're going to get blown to the east of the center, so maybe towards Florida or Alabama, so somewhere in here, whereas the center may still be hanging out around here or so. And, you know, it's a hard thing to forecast where that rain may end up being. So this is why we're saying don't cancel your plans in Louisiana or Mississippi this weekend yet, because let's say what's left over of this comes limping on into the coastline, and there is still a center of circulation. Heck, it may come right over New Orleans. But all that wind shear has displaced all the rain out this way. So that's why it's far from a slam dunk forecast at this point. And I've been, you know, you get people saying they don't have a clue. And, you know, at the end of the day, we don't know exactly what is going to happen Saturday and Sunday with regard to where the rain may be or where the center of circulation will be. One thing we're pretty certain on is that it will weaken enough that it's not going to be a major impactful storm to anyone on the northern Gulf. Yeah, there may be some wind and rain, but you're not talking about a storm where you're going to have evacuations. You know, you may have higher than normal tides, but this is not going to be a significant wind threat. This is not going to be a significant, you know, catastrophic flooding event. So why are we thinking this thing will weaken? Well, those three things I mentioned, the wind shear, the dry air, and the water temperatures. I can show you when we think it will start to weaken based on this big wall of wind shear. Here we are Thursday. It's still doing pretty good. I mean, this is why we think it could still be a healthy hurricane in the Gulf. Here we are Thursday afternoon. It's sitting north of Cuba. Not a whole lot of wind shear, but do you see the wall right here? There it is, and watch it as we go out in time. Eventually, what's left of the storm, it punches into that wall, and that's when things start to get disrupted. The core of the storm will start to collapse, and all that rain starts to get pulled away from the center, and therefore the storm can't strengthen anymore. That happens late Friday in most models, if not all models. And so by Saturday, it's really feeling the full effects. And I'll be honest with you, by Sunday, while it shows a tropical storm icon sitting off the coast of Louisiana, there just simply may not be much left over of Rafael as it approaches the area. So at the moment, this is for Louisiana if you're watching me on the web here or YouTube. I've got about a 30 to 40% chance of rain between Friday and Sunday. I think the most likely scenario is whatever's left over of the storm comes limping into Louisiana or Mississippi, somewhere in here, by around Saturday or Sunday. There's a couple showers with it, but a lot of the rain could be displaced from the center, and it may just be breezier. And so that's why I don't want you to cancel plans. Now, if you are going to anything that requires outdoor events, maybe you're putting up a tent for tailgating for Bama or LSU, it's probably a good idea to make sure all that is foundation to the ground, maybe staked in the ground, because, you know, you could have 20, 30, 40 mile an hour winds with a decaying tropical system. It may not just have, you know, major impacts with regard to power outages or major flooding. This is still preliminary. Keep in mind, we're still waiting for that storm to emerge on the other side of Cuba. That'll happen tomorrow evening, and if it does come in a lot stronger than what our models are saying, we may have to adjust some things, but that's what we're thinking at least right now. Also, I think everyone and their dogs are going on a cruise in the next 1 to 2 weeks, because I've gotten a tremendous amount of messages about cruises and people worried about their cruises. So what I can tell you, and I can't give the forecast for every cruise, but I can tell you what's going to happen in the Gulf. If you are heading to Cancun or Cozumel, you're not going to have any direct impacts from the storm down there. Now, one thing you will notice in the Gulf, Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, are rough seas. I mean, things are going to be rocking and rolling. The Gulf is not going to be a pleasant place. Anywhere in the green here, this is Thursday, by the way, you can see seas getting up 10, 15, maybe approaching 20-foot waves in and around what's left over of that probably hurricane on Thursday. Now, if you're trying to go from New Orleans down to maybe Key West or South Florida or Cuba, somewhere in the Florida Straits there, that could be impacted. And I mean, we are expecting tropical storm conditions even towards Key West later into Wednesday night. So just keep that in mind. But the Gulf is going to be a messy place. It's going to be rocking and rolling. It's not going to be smooth sailing for the rest of this week and into the weekend here. So that is the latest on Tropical Storm Rafael. The storm is expected to intensify. The National Hurricane Center says it looks like it is intensifying. This morning we've had multiple hurricane hunters flying in there. That'll continue for the foreseeable future. And you can see hurricane warnings are in effect for the Cayman Islands. Could have hurricane conditions there tonight in the Cayman Islands. For Cuba, it'll be tomorrow afternoon. That does include Havana in the hurricane warning there. And then by Wednesday night, the storm is lifting away from Cuba in the Gulf, and we can see it probably maintaining its hurricane intensity up until around Friday. And then by Saturday and Sunday, and I'll be honest with you, what is left of this will be limping its way up towards Louisiana, and there may not be a whole lot. So I'm optimistic here. You know, I've been listening to all my my peers here Alexa, Brooke, and Chris talk about this. We're all thinking about the same thing, that, you know, this is November. It's not an August or September storm. This is not going to be a major, major problem for anyone, but it is certainly something to watch here, especially with all our outdoor events going on this weekend. And we're talking about Tulane's homecoming. The Saints are playing in town on Sunday. LSU and Bama is a major game up in LSU or in Baton Rouge this weekend. So a lot to watch here, but I don't want you stressing about this. We've got plenty more to stress about with other things. And so this is what's going on with it right now. Maybe some rain and wind, certainly a possibility, but the trends are our friend at this point. And so we're feeling okay, but continue to stay up to date. We will have multiple updates for you. And just a reminder, the track updates are coming at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. during the daytime. They're no longer at 10 and 4. That's because of the time change. In meteorology, we stay set to Zulu time, which never changes. And so that's why we've seen the adjustment in your track updates and things like that. So that's going to do it here. Thank you so much for joining me, whether on YouTube, social media, or WWL Plus. We will have plenty more updates for you. Thank you.